So probably we can get started. So thanks everyone for coming to this session. Second day, intense 2 days, I believe, at least it was for me. And especially coming off after a beer break, thank you. I'm Anand Bagmar. I'm working with ThoughtWorks as a test practice lead. For those who've not attended the earlier session, I'll just give a quick introduction. Been involved with testing related activities for 18, 20 years. I do whatever it takes from a testing perspective. My contact information is on the About Me page. My Twitter ID, hashtag is also there. Please feel free to contact me for any other thoughts, suggestions, feedbacks around the same. So let's get into the core topic for today. Before we understand that, or understand how do we automate across various different platforms, technologies, it's important to understand what the objective of the organization really is. And regardless of whichever organization we look at, there are three primary objectives around which the organization functions. They need to make money. They need to make money by providing value to its end customers. If it's a not-for-profit organization, so money is probably not in terms of making, but conserving the money and doing maximum possible in that. In order to do that, they need to get their product or their services out in front of their end users in proper time. Only then can they really make something out of it. But that will not help if the end product is not of good quality. So these three things, if any of that is compromised, it's not really going to be successful. So these are the highest level objectives that are there. The other reality is organizations are now distributed across the world for whatever reason. Some reasons that very quickly come on top of my mind are because of globalization or cost factors. You want 24/7. You just want to keep going every time, every minute is valuable. The team sizes are just becoming so large that you need to spread out into different locations. It could be in the same building, different floor, different buildings, different cities, countries, whatever that might be. Mergers and acquisitions are also a very common thing. And of course, there is talent. Talented people across the globe, and you want to tap into that talent pool to make the most, to achieve your objectives. Now, if this is the way organizations are sort of structured, let's quickly understand from your own experiences what kind of organizations you represent in that sense. Now, large is very subjective, but how many of you are from a large organization? Let's say more than 500 people? Okay, a good few hands. Okay, I think 500 is large enough. Would you quantify 500 large? Relatively, okay. What are the average number of products or projects that your organization has going on? 50? 250? Wow, okay. That's a lot. 7? Okay. That's still complex. That is still complex. Anything more than one is complex for me. Okay? Yeah. Okay? Now, for all these 7 projects or products or the 250, what's a typical technology stack that you have? Is it all Java-based or all .NET-based? Mostly Java or all Java? Mostly Java. So that means there is some variants of other technologies also. What would those be? .NET? Okay. Anyone over here part of merged or acquired companies also? Mergers, acquisitions keep happening. There are a few people around that. Okay. In such cases, is the decision based on the merger or acquisition based on the product offering or more on the technology side of things? Product based, right? It has to fit into the life cycle of whatever you're trying to do. I wouldn't say, okay, oh no, sorry, you're doing C++, I cannot merge with you or whatever. That thought process is different. It's more about the value proposition than the technology implementation. Anyone over here not worked in distributed teams? Everyone is working in distributed teams. Okay, good. Have we heard of a concept called Common Test Automation Framework? What does it mean? Sorry? Okay, so sorry, I'm not able to hear this. The acoustics in this room are not very good. Okay, common way of writing the scripts. Is that what you said? Sort of? Okay. So, is this good or bad?
It is bad.
Why?
Each team should do their own automation if they are not integrated to other teams. So you have your own parts, you have your own project, and you need to make your automation which fits the best for your current team. So
excellent. I like the way you think. He said that it's bad to have a common test automation framework because each team should be doing the right thing for their particular product. Anyone wants to counter that argument? Anyone thinks common test automation frameworks is good? Yeah. Okay. And that's an excellent reason. So I agree with that also. I'm going to play two sides of the coin over here. So there's a good reason why it might be important to have some shared code base, infrastructure, utilities, whatever might be required, which goes across testing various different products or pieces of code configurations in your product portfolio. But then, is it easy to build it? A common test automation framework? Or is it difficult? Yeah?
So I work with a company with a lot of teams all over the place. And so this depends on who you are talking about.
So context is important is what you're saying.
Right? So
Yeah.
I use common test automation framework if they use mine.
Okay. That's a very powerful statement. But it is, so again, I think each one of you is right from your own perspective because you're thinking about a particular context that you are in, what complexities there are, what the domain is, what the team structure is, skills, capabilities, distribution. So it's not really a straightforward answer to say, yes, it is easy or it is difficult. Yes, it is good or it is bad. It's very, very subjective. And each specific organization would have to take that decision. But then, if the organization does not really care about, at least not care as much about the technology stack, and the value proposition is much more important to them when they're building their products or acquiring different companies, why do we have to think different about test automation? Test automation is also code. It is just doing something. The products that you're buying is also code. It's a value proposition that is important around that. And that's why I completely agree with what you said, right? Sorry, may I know your name, please? Dima. Okay. So what he said is absolutely right, that you should be doing automation using the right tools and technology based on that particular product itself. At the same time, I agree with what she said, because it makes it easier if you have to share certain pieces of infrastructure. The difference is going to be you share where it makes sense. You don't force fit it. If out of those 250 projects or products, 100 of them are of the similar tech stack, maybe it is easy to build that common framework and use it across. But you're not force fitting it for the rest of the 150 or whatever that number split might be. Okay? So let's take a look at a quick case study, and this is a dated case study, but I hope the point gets across. Microsoft Outlook comes in various different variants. There's Outlook for Windows, for Mac. There is a web access from a browser. There are mobile apps for Android. I don't know what other variants you have to access your Outlook emails. Okay? If this is a product that you're building, how will you do automation testing for it? What comes to my mind is, I might use something like White or QTP, or I'm sure there are many other tools to automate a desktop product for Windows, Outlook in this case. On Mac, maybe I use Automator. For web access, no-brainer. We are in Selenium conference. That is the first thing that comes to mind. Outlook Sync for Android, maybe it's APM or whichever else you want to use. You would use specific tools, because clearly over here, one tool doesn't really come to mind immediately, at least not to me. Okay? So this is fine. Now you're forced to think about tools, technologies for each specific variant based on the platform in this case. How are you going to do the integration testing across these particular products? And what do we mean by that? So for example, if I as a user, I have my email configured in each of these products, and I want to verify if I create and save an email as draft in any one variant, it gets synced to the other variants also. I'm able to see that. How do I do that? And this is where that integration test really comes into picture, of saying that I'm creating and saving an email, then I have to go to the other product, verify it is there, and that cycle completes. I need to automate this part. The challenge is, you have now different technology stacks across for each of these products. How do you get it accomplished? Easy ways, I will not automate this scenario, I'll verify this in a manual fashion. Yes, in some cases that might work fine. But in quite a few cases, you might want to complete this last mile automation also. So we need to go across all these different platforms, tools, whatever our frameworks might be, in order to complete this testing. My original problem was also very similar. Why I actually came up with this particular solution. I had built a Cucumber Ruby-based test automation framework for an auction site. And we proved that automation is successful in that organization. And they started going for, yes, we need to automate everything else also. But they chose to build a completely new framework, Ruby-based again, but a completely new framework, and started implementing the tests over there. Now the problem was that the product that I had built automation for and the other products, they were integrated. There is data moving across these products. How do we validate that particular type of situation. And the easy way was for me that I will duplicate the test in my framework, which I require to go across the other products to complete that integration. And vice versa, the other framework would need to duplicate certain functionality, automation functionality, for the integration for the auction product that I had built. So it was duplication. Or one of us drops the framework we are doing, migrate into the other one, so that we start using a common test automation framework. Company has spent a lot of money on building this. No one would just want to drop it off because of such kind of reasons. So this is where I came up with a solution, and I chose to call it TAAS. How does it work? We now have got two test automation frameworks. Again, coming back to our Outlook example, we've got two test automation frameworks. Let's say one is for the Windows, the other is for the web-based version. And now I have my end-to-end integration test that I need to automate. I'm going to deploy a server component on each of these frameworks which has specific tests implemented for that particular tool, for that specific product. These become my service providers. Then my integration test framework becomes a client which is going to do orchestration between the different service providers. Okay? With me so far? So all we have done is added a thin wrapper of a TAAS server and a TAAS client on existing testing infrastructure, and that's how we are going to do our automation for that integration. So let's look at how really this works. On the TAAS server side, because these are service providers, there's a contract. Contract is an agreement between two parties. This contract we specify in a simple YAML file. The YAML file looks like this. There is a name of the contract. In this example, create and verify email. There is a timeout, directory, command, input parameters, and output parameters. Input parameters is what input the service providers require in order to accomplish certain functionality, and what response are they going to give back as part of calling that particular service contract. The directory and command tells us on the machine where the TAAS server is running, which directory in that particular machine do I want to go to, and what is the command I want to run from that directory in order to accomplish this contract of create and verify email. The timeout helps in two different ways. One, the client, the caller of this particular contract, knows in how much time maximum can I expect a response before I time out and do whatever else is required for it. On the other hand, for whatever reasons, if the server is not able to respond in that particular time, TAAS will break off that connection and say timed out. The client uses this timeout information to adjust their handling of saying, if, for example, I am waiting for a particular element to appear in the browser, maximum I'll wait for 10 seconds. But I know this contract is going to be for 100 seconds in this case. I need to adjust my timeout values. So it helps that orchestration become more deterministic. Now, why this becomes very powerful? On Windows, I'm providing a Windows path and some exe file and some parameters to that, how to execute that particular test for create and verify email. Let's say on a Mac, my directory is different, or a Linux directory is different, the command is different, but the contract has remained the same. So true to the definition of a service provider, it does not matter how the service is implemented. There is a standard way of interacting with it. And that becomes a very, very powerful mechanism. Now, once the contract has been specified, the server will go and implement it. To implement it, if I'm Outlook on Windows, for example, I know I need to create and save email. I already have my test framework where I want to use the word tons of tests very cautiously. I have a bunch of tests to automate the Outlook functionality. One of them probably already is create and save email. All I now need to do is expose that particular test in such a way that it can be called from command line from a task server perspective. So I'm going to update my test to handle the input parameters that have come in from the task client, sent to the task server, and eventually to this framework. Take those input parameters as environment variables. Execute the test. I know how to execute it already. I execute it. Once that happens, potentially this can look like this. This is a Cucumber Ruby example for that matter. I have a task annotation, create and save email. In my before hook, if I have a task annotation on the test, I'm going to retrieve all parameters that task server has sent, which it sends with a prefix of task underscore. So I'm just going to query everything, get those parameters, store it into a hash map. Then I'll execute the test based on those parameters, and I'm going to return the results as defined by the contract directly into the console output. We put in special markers whenever the output parameters are being sent out, so that the task server, when it is monitoring the console output, knows where to look for, oh, I got the markers that I need. Anything inside it is what the output parameters are. It extracts that, converts it into JSON, and sends it back as a response to the task client. Also, as part of the response, we are not just sending the output parameters, we are also sending the console logs, because the client might want to know what exactly was the execution that happened. If there are any exceptions, we send that back as well. So again, there is error handling that the client can do based on what is happening. And as I said, all return values are in the JSON format. So how would you collect the output parameters? Again, the test implementation knows what the output parameters are required based on the contract. For each test, we would just create a hash map in this example, whatever values are required for it. And in the after hook, after the test has completed, I'm just going to dump it out between the special markers in the console. So technically speaking, the server implementation of a test needs to do just three things. Take input parameters, run the test, which I already know how to do that, return the output parameters. So these three activities are there. And the way I showed it, it's a generic way of getting input variables, and how do you send the output variables back. Once you have implemented the contract, all that is remaining is find a dedicated machine where this test framework is available for running the test. Set up the task server on it, which is running using Sinatra, a very lightweight server, and provide that IP address, port name combination to the client so that they can start calling this particular service. On the client side, all we need to do is, I know now where my server is for this orchestration. I'm going to instantiate that connection to that server. And as part of my test orchestration, whenever I need to call this particular test to complete or do a part of that orchestration, I'll just send in the input parameters as defined in the contract and invoke that REST service. It becomes a very straight HTTP call to the server to get the functionality implemented. As part of this orchestration, I don't really care how that service provider really implemented the test. For all I care, I might be getting dummy data back. It is okay, as long as I can consume it and proceed with the orchestration. In some cases, they might directly talk to the database, get the values back, or actually run a test to get that implementation done before sending the data back. But true to the definition of service architecture, service-oriented architecture, I don't care how the implementation has been done. What I'm worried about or I'm focused on is the orchestration of these scenarios, the integration scenarios. So what does this mean? What is TAAS really? What we have now done is created a very thin framework of sorts, a server side, a client side, which cuts across the boundaries of platform, operating system, or technology stack, because now in my contract, all I'm doing is specifying a directory and a command to be executed on the server side, on the service provider side rather, and that's all I really know. It could be located anywhere in my company infrastructure. It could be implemented or hosted on any type of OS, and I don't really care about it. I might be sitting on a Windows machine, the test might be running from a Linux machine, or vice versa. I don't know, I don't care in that sense. It becomes a very powerful way. So in this case, I could potentially have a QTP-based test as long as it can be run, invoked using command line. I can have a QTP test as a service provider. On the other side, I can have a Selenium-based test, and I can integrate between these two as long as the correct contract has been specified. So why is this a good idea then? As long as I've identified the set of products in my organization which are on the similar tech stack, and I've chosen the right tools and technologies for automation of that, then the common framework aspect works fine. But the minute it starts becoming a compromise, okay, I have this framework, it is not 100% suited for this particular tool, I don't need to use it anymore. I can create a new framework which is appropriately suited for that set of products, maybe have a common framework for that technology stack for that matter, right? Or those suite of products. And now I can still integrate between them without having to worry about automating the last mile. And that to me is the most important. You don't want to just not automate because there are different technology stacks. Automation is very crucial. We need to do that. It also prevents the code duplication aspects. Now I don't need to re-implement the same test which another framework might have in my framework, which might again not be 100% feasible for that matter. That becomes another huge advantage. The implementation of the contract lies with the team, the framework, who are actually testing that particular product. Which means that test framework will also evolve along with that product as it evolves. So as long as my contract is maintained, create and save email, that contract sanity is maintained, I don't care how it is really implemented. Earlier it might be a one-click operation, now it might require 10 different screens of the workflow, the way it has evolved. That test should automatically take care of it. So implementation is of the test of the contract lies with that particular service provider itself. And that becomes very, very powerful. And now we have decoupled the technology barrier. We've kept it separate. We are not limited by it at all. This also has some other advantages. It can help in setting up data in some other systems for which you don't really have a lot of idea about or control on for that matter. It can be used by testers, it can be used by business analysts, or whoever else requires, they can use that. Because it's just a service call, you can use any plugin, poster or whatever plugins might be there. You just connect to the server for that specific contract, give the data required, and it works fine. And now, we have achieved the goal of doing automation the right way without compromise. And that's why I actually call it test as a service. I dropped test as a service from TAAS because test as a service has a different business meaning to it. This is not about the testing operational side of things or the business side of testing. It's actually using test to implement certain functionality which can be used as a service. Now, I've had a bunch of questions that I've come across in the past. Can this be used to test the product itself or build a product itself? No, it's not to integrate products, it's to integrate testing. Why? Because the technology stack used for building the TAAS framework is very simple. For a product, you need to think about it in a different fashion. It doesn't have any security in that sense because we are thinking it's going to be used inside the organization. There are no firewall constraints or VPN constraints, whatever that might be there. Because it's a service, can I just have 10 requests run against it at the same time or use it for load testing? No, this is not for that. There are better tools, better suited for that purpose. So understand the intent, that is most important over here. How can you use it? If you think you are in a situation where you've got to integrate across multiple set of products where existing test automation might be there, this is open source. It's available as a Ruby gem directly from, as a gem from Ruby gems. You can get it. You can just get the code directly from GitHub and you can just start using it. Does it really work? So far, it has been downloaded over 2,500 times, which means potentially people are using it and it is working for them. But doesn't mean it is going to work for you. As with using any tool or selecting any tool or technology, you have to do your due diligence to see what is my exact requirement, how do I intend to fulfill that requirement, and then say, okay, what options do I have in terms of tooling to accomplish that? And if that due diligence says that yes, this potentially might work for you, it's available for you in that case. There's silence. I can't see anyone's eyes open. So that's all I had in terms of content. This is something that really worked for me. I did not have to do any duplication. Got the problem solved. Maybe it can work for you. Thoughts? It can be anything. As long as you have a, so again, I would question the need of doing that. But as long as there is a good need, as long as you can run a specific test invoked from command line, that is the only criteria. As long as you can do that, it doesn't matter. It might, as I said, it might just return dummy data immediately. It might actually go to a database, do certain things. It might actually run a test for you and then return the values. It can do any of that. Yep.
So the way you explain this, it looks like it's not the test that's the main focus. It's you're using tests to drive other applications. Am I right?
So the question is, it's not necessarily about a test. You're using this as a means to drive the product in a certain way. Right. Yes and, no and yes. So we're using this to drive a test which is going to drive a product. That's the way I have used it. So I'm actually calling a test. So if we look at the contract, I didn't realize there are so many slides. Okay. So if we look at this contract, right? The command I am giving is a cucumber command in this example, which is going to run a cucumber test from this particular directory, tests Outlook Linux. But it could be anything. I could just be returning a value directly from here, echo something which is going to return a value based on what is required.
I'm just thinking that assume that you don't have this.
if we don't have TAAS, you could use something like R shell, you said? Yeah. So it is quite possible. So again, the concept is more important over here. There are a couple of things I want to drive home from this particular talk, is that don't restrict yourself to saying that, no, I have to use a common test framework regardless of what products I'm integrating with. If that is not possible, use the tools, technologies, which will be correct for it, and then find means how to automate that last mile. If it means the setup is as simple as just invoking a certain command directly and getting a response from it, that's fine. But if it means that I don't really have control over where that other product is, what that other framework is, what type of test might be automated over there, I don't know that. It might be a different team for all you said. Right? Like you said earlier, as long as they use my framework, I'm okay using a common one. So there are a lot of constraints we are putting on ourselves. If the constraints mean that I don't have an easy mechanism, this might be one of the ways. I believe there are a couple of other options also which have similar kind of implementations which will allow you to execute tests remotely.
So I have a reason for saying this, actually. So if it's product can be driven a certain way, it is public knowledge. People know that parts of the system or whatever. On the other hand, if I have to run a particular test in somewhere else, test based, whatever, they have a like document, whatever, it will be impossible for me to know this particular test.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, the comment is that if it is going to be a huge test suite on the other side, which I don't know about, it is going to be difficult to use something like this. That's what you said, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So typically they're undocumented and it's not they're not
Correct. Correct. And that's why the contract, understanding of a contract is important. This is a negotiation between two parties, between two teams, to say this is what I need to achieve as part of my integration test. As part of this integration test, I need to come to Outlook on Mac and I need to validate these aspects. I don't care how you do it because I don't understand it. I don't know if you have Outlook running or not. Maybe you need to start Outlook, whatever is required. I don't know. Maybe you have hundreds of tests. I don't know which one to call, even though it might be in a version control system that's accessible to me. You're absolutely right. We don't know. What is important in the negotiation is name of the contract, timeout, input parameters, output parameters. The directory and command is something that is used by the service provider to say, I have this test framework running on this platform, it will be in this directory, and this is how you would invoke a specific test. The service provider will fill in the directory and command information. But everything else is a negotiation of sorts between the orchestrator or the client and the server side. And that's how you would know which out of those 500 or 5,000 tests you need to call as a client to get your functionality implemented or to proceed with your orchestration. Yep.
My question is, can we execute these contracts in parallel? Does that matter, or does it have to go sequentially into?
So, question is, can we execute these contracts in parallel? Good question. I don't see why not, because it's a server running, it's a Sinatra-based web server that is running. And as long as your test implementation can take care of parallel executions, it should be fine. That said, coming back to the disclaimer of sorts, this is not a load testing tool. So try it out. If it doesn't work, maybe you need to, it's Sinatra, so you can do configuration settings, how many parallel threads can you accept on it at the same time. If you need parallel execution, or rather if parallel execution is not supported, maybe you need some form of a queuing mechanism, so that one after the other the services will get processed. In my case, it was a very specific thing. I knew it's going to be one request coming at a time. Though it's running as part of CI, I don't really have a lot of these type of integration tests. It's just a last mile automation that is there for me. So I didn't really have that constraint. It's a web server. It will accept parallel or multiple requests coming in at the same time. Again, the question over there becomes, can I send in or can I have multiple calls to the same contract? Or there could be multiple of these, create and save email, delete email, whatever it might be, right? Are we just saying there are multiple requests coming for any type of contract? That again might have different implications in terms of executing it. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, so thank you very much for being here. I will be around for rest of the day. And then after that, I will be available on email or Twitter, wherever. I won't be in the US. I'm going back to India tomorrow. So thank you for attending this session. Looking forward to hear from you again.